crowned another as his Luna, not knowing I was carrying the bloodline that could end his reign. The sun never fully rose, and the moon hung like a silver sentinel in the sky, casting its soft glow over the ancient stone walls of the castle. Whispers of magic lingered in the air, and the courtiers moved through the halls like shadows, their faces carefully masked with duty and secrets. Leora walked along the outer edge of the grand plaza, her dark cloak pulled tightly around her shoulders. She had watched the coronation from the edge of the crowd, far enough to avoid notice, close enough to feel the tremor of history beneath her feet. Today, King Kale had crowned another woman as his Luna. The name of the chosen woman, Selene, would echo through the halls for years, a symbol of loyalty, love, and power intertwined. Leora's heart tightened as the crown settled on Selene's head. Every glittering jewel reflected a reality she had long feared. She should have been standing there. She should have been the Luna, chosen not for alliances but for blood, for the magic that pulsed through her veins, a magic that carried the potential to end a reign and reshape a kingdom. But the king had chosen differently. Even from a distance, Leora could see him. Kale stood tall, regal in his black and silver robes, his hand lightly brushing Selene's as the crowd erupted into applause. His face was composed, but she could read the faint shadow of conflict in his eyes. She had watched him from the shadows for years, the way he moved through his court like a man both trapped and free, and she knew him too well to be deceived by appearances. A part of her wanted to turn away, to vanish into the quiet streets beyond the palace walls. But another part, the deeper, more dangerous part, hungered for a moment, even the briefest in which she could be seen. And so she lingered, hidden in shadow, feeling the stirrings of her magic. Her bloodline was old, older than the stones beneath her feet, and tied to the phases of the moon. Tonight, the full moon rose high, its silver light spilling over the marble courtyard. Leora felt it in her bones, a warmth spreading from her chest, an awakening that both thrilled and terrified her. The blood in her veins pulsed like a drumbeat, a signal of power she had been raised to control and conceal. From the balcony above, the king's voice echoed through the plaza, speaking words of honor, loyalty, and unity. Leora's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak. She had memorized every word of the oath, every step of the ceremony. She had imagined herself there countless nights, standing at Kale's side, the weight of destiny pressing against her heart. And now she was nothing but a shadow, unseen and unheard, yet burning with the quiet fire of a name that could shake a kingdom. A soft sound behind her made Leora flinch. She turned quickly, her heart hammering. A young servant boy, no older than 12, stood watching her with wide eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They'll see you." "I know," Leora said quietly, her gaze returning to the balcony. "But I had to see this one last time." The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful." And with that, he melted back into the crowd, leaving her alone again. The ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse. Leora stayed, hidden, watching as the new Luna descended the steps to meet the king. Selene's smile was radiant, confident, and yet too perfect. Leora felt a pang of something she could not name, envy, longing, sorrow, and then buried it beneath a practiced calm. She would not give Selene the satisfaction of knowing her pain. As the crowd thinned, Leora slipped into the shadows of the palace gardens. She had always loved the gardens, even as a child. The twisted paths and hidden alcoves were perfect for secrets, for magic, for the quiet moments when she could be herself. Tonight, she walked among the silver leaves, the scent of night-blooming flowers filling her senses. She stopped by a marble fountain, its waters reflecting the moonlight. Her reflection shimmered on the surface, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had lost. She had been raised to be strong, to hide her power, to survive in a world that would use her bloodline as a weapon. And yet, watching Kale with Selene, she felt the old ache return, the ache of love unspoken, of destiny delayed, of a life that could have been hers. A rustle of leaves made her turn, and her heart skipped a beat. A figure stepped into the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that seemed to pierce through shadow, King Kale was there, alone. Leora froze. She had expected to see him surrounded by guards or servants, but here he was, unguarded, watching the moon with a faraway expression. Her magic stirred again, faintly, responding to the presence of the one who would unknowingly be entwined with her destiny. "You should not be here," he said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet garden. It was not a command, but a warning, gentle yet edged with something she could not quite name. "I could say the same," Leora replied, her voice steady even though her pulse raced. He stepped closer, his gaze lingering on her face. "You have grown," he said, as if recognizing a ghost from his past. "Leora, you are no longer the child I once knew." "And yet you chose another," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Her eyes met his, and in that instant she saw a flicker of something in him, regret, perhaps, or confusion. Kale looked away, his jaw tightening. "The choice was made for the kingdom, not for me." Leora nodded slowly, understanding more than he could know. The weight of the crown, the duty of the throne, and the chains of expectation. It was not a simple matter of desire or love. And yet, she could not deny the sting of betrayal that cut through her chest. The moonlight shone down on them, silver and cold, as if the heavens themselves were watching this meeting of shadow and fate. Leora felt her power thrumming beneath her skin, a reminder that she was not as powerless as she appeared. She could change everything. She could end a reign, reshape a kingdom, and claim what was hers. But in this moment she held back, letting the tension linger, letting the unspoken words hang between them. "I should leave," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have your Luna. And I am nothing but a shadow." "You are not a shadow," Kale replied, his voice low, almost a confession. "You are something else, something I cannot ignore." The words sent a shiver down her spine, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to imagine a different life. One where she stood at his side, not in the shadows, where their hands could meet without fear, where destiny could be rewritten. But reality intruded, cold and harsh. "I cannot be what you think," she said, turning toward the path that led out of the gardens. Her cloak billowed behind her, carrying her away like a whisper. Kale watched her go, his hand brushing the edge of the fountain where she had stood. He wanted to call her back, to ask her name, to demand that she stay, but the words caught in his throat. Duty, pride, and the weight of the throne held him silent. Leora disappeared into the night, her heart heavy yet alive with a new fire. Her bloodline stirred within her, stronger than ever. The magic she had long hidden pulsed in response to the moon, to the king, to the destiny that had been placed in her hands before she was even born. The kingdom slept, unaware of the storm that had begun. And in the quiet of the palace gardens, two hearts, bound by fate and longing, had brushed against each other, leaving an echo that would not fade. As Leora vanished into the dark streets beyond the castle, she whispered a promise to herself, soft and certain. And somewhere in the stillness of the night, under the watchful eye of the silver moon, that promise took root, quietly, like a seed waiting to bloom. The kingdom had crowned a Luna, but it had not yet seen the shadow of the bloodline that could change everything. The palace of Lumeria was quieter now than it had been during the coronation. The banners still hung in the halls, catching faint silver light from the moon, but the court had returned to its usual rhythm of whispers, plotting, and hidden rivalries. Yet in the shadows of the grand halls, Leora moved unseen, her cloak blending with the darkness, her heart beating with a mix of fear and determination. She had not returned to the palace for mere curiosity. The awakening she had felt beneath the full moon had left her restless. Her bloodline had stirred in response to the king, and with each step toward the castle she felt a pulse of power, subtle yet undeniable, reminding her of the destiny she carried in her veins. Her plan was simple, at least in theory. Leora would enter the palace disguised as a servant, quiet and unnoticed, observing the king and his court. She would learn, wait, and test the strength of her magic before making any move. It was a delicate balance. One misstep could expose her, and the consequences would be severe. The first days were the hardest. She carried water to the kitchens, polished silver, and swept marble floors, all the while listening to whispered conversations that revealed the hidden currents of loyalty and fear. Selene, the new Luna, commanded respect, but not devotion. Some courtiers openly questioned her suitability, murmuring about her ambition and lack of connection to the moon's magic. Leora heard these words and smiled quietly. The seeds of doubt had already begun to sprout, but the king was different. Kale moved through the palace with an almost invisible tension, the weight of the crown heavy on his shoulders. Leora watched him from afar, noticing the small things, the way he lingered too long in a room after Selene had left, the way his fingers brushed a balcony railing as if he wished he could leave the castle entirely. She had seen that look before in dreams, in memories from long ago when she had still been a child in the palace gardens. One night, the moon hung high, silver and full, and the palace was quieter than usual. Leora had finished her duties and found herself near the balcony where the king often walked at night. She paused at the shadowed archway, watching him as he leaned over the railing, gazing at the gardens below. "Your Majesty," she said softly, careful to keep her voice low. Kale's head turned sharply. For a moment surprise flickered across his face, and then a faint, knowing smile appeared. "Leora," his voice held a mixture of recognition and caution. How did you come here?" "I belong here," she said, keeping her tone calm. "In the palace, in the gardens, in the shadows where no one sees me." His gaze softened, but his jaw remained tense. "You are not a shadow. You are something more, something dangerous." She looked away, her fingers brushing the railing where he had touched it moments ago. "I do not wish to be dangerous," she said. "I only wish to see what I have lost." Kale's eyes darkened with something unspoken. He leaned closer, his voice low. "And what have you found, Leora?" "Only that the kingdom moves without me," she admitted. "That the king chooses others while I watch and wait." For a moment the night was silent except for the soft rustle of leaves. Leora felt her magic stir, responding to his presence, humming faintly in her hands. She forced herself to breathe, to control it, to keep the power hidden. Yet the pull between them was undeniable, a tension that neither wanted to name but both could feel. "I did not choose her because I loved her more," Kale said finally, his voice almost a whisper. "I chose her for the kingdom, and yet I feel something else, something I cannot ignore." Leora's heart skipped. She wanted to speak, to confess everything, but she held back. The path of desire was dangerous, tangled with power and prophecy. And yet just as quickly as the thought came, it left a hollow ache in her chest. The next days tested her resolve. Leora continued her work in the palace, moving among servants and guards, listening and learning. She watched Kale interact with Selene, noting the small moments of hesitation and doubt. There were gestures, fleeting and subtle, that revealed cracks in their bond, his glance lingering on her hands while Selene spoke, a faint hesitation before he took her hand, a softness in his voice that did not match the ceremonial formality. Leora's own heart ached at these moments. She wanted to reach out, to tell him the truth, but she knew that revealing herself too soon could ruin everything. The magic in her bloodline demanded patience, cunning, and control. One mistake, one overt gesture of power, and she could be banished, or worse. It was during one such quiet night that danger arrived. A figure moved swiftly through the palace corridors, cloaked in shadows. Leora's instincts flared, her senses heightened. She followed silently, the soft hum of magic guiding her steps. The figure paused near the gardens where Kale often walked alone, and a dagger gleamed in the moonlight. Leora's heart raced. Without thinking, she reached out, her magic surging through her fingertips. A sudden, invisible force struck the intruder, sending him tumbling to the ground with a muted gasp. Kale, who had been walking toward the garden, froze. His eyes widened in shock and recognition. Leora! She stepped into the moonlight, her hands still tingling with power. "You should not be here," she said calmly, though her pulse raced. "He came for you." Kale moved closer, his eyes scanning the figure on the ground. "How did you? Who?" "I told you I belong in the shadows," Leora said, her voice steady, though her heart hammered with adrenaline. "I watch, I wait, and I protect in ways you cannot see." For the first time, Kale truly saw her, not as a shadow, not as a servant, not as a forgotten noble, but as a force of power and destiny. His gaze softened, but fear and awe mingled there as well. "Your power, it is real," he said quietly. I did not know." Leora felt a thrill at his words, but also a caution. Power was not meant to impress or frighten, it was meant to be wielded wisely. "It is real," she said, "and it is tied to the moon, to my bloodline, to the destiny I carry. I did not come here to fight you, King Kale. I came to protect you." Kale's lips parted, but no words came. He reached out almost instinctively, but stopped himself. The tension between them was electric, a storm waiting to break. For a moment the garden seemed suspended in time, silver light reflecting off leaves, the air thick with unspoken longing. "I cannot ignore what I feel," Kale said finally, his voice low and trembling with restraint. "And yet I am bound by duty, by the oath I swore to the kingdom and to her." Leora's heart clenched. She knew the burden of oaths and crowns, of duty and expectation. She had seen it in the eyes of the king, felt it in the pulse of the castle itself. And yet in that moment she made a choice. She would not hide, she would not pretend. "I do not ask you to break your oath," she said gently, "but I will not deny who I am, I will not disappear, not again." For a long moment they stood there, two souls bound by fate, destiny, and a quiet, forbidden longing. Then, as if the night itself had heard their unspoken promises, a soft light flickered across the garden. Leora felt her magic respond, stronger now, as if the moon itself acknowledged her awakening. "You are more than I imagined," Kale whispered, almost to himself. "And yet I fear what comes next." "Then let us face it together," Leora said, her voice firm, steady, and sure. "The kingdom, the crown, everything can wait. For now, just this." But destiny would not wait. The palace walls held secrets darker than ambition or desire. Factions of the court, jealous and wary, had already begun to notice the subtle traces of magic in the halls. Whispers spread, small and careful, of a hidden force moving among the servants. Leora's awakening had not gone unnoticed. And so, even as she and the king shared a quiet, charged moment beneath the silver moon, danger moved unseen, weaving threads of suspicion, betrayal, and hidden plots that would soon entangle them both. Leora knew the coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. Her bloodline demanded courage, cunning, and restraint. Her heart demanded honesty, vulnerability, and love. And the king demanded everything she was not yet ready to give. Yet as she walked away from the garden, her cloak brushing against the cool marble, Leora felt the first true surge of hope. She had been seen, acknowledged, and perhaps even understood. The moonlight glinted off her hands, now glowing faintly with the magic that was hers by birthright. The first step toward her destiny had been taken. And somewhere deep within, she knew that the greatest challenges and the most dangerous betrayals were still to come. The full moon hung high over Lumeria, casting silver light across the castle and gardens. Its glow made the marble corridors shimmer and the shadows grow longer, twisting along the walls like living things. Inside, Leora moved quietly, her cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. She had become more than a servant. She had become a shadow that the king could not ignore, a presence that pulsed with magic he could feel but did not fully understand. Her powers had grown stronger since that night in the garden when she had saved him. The faint glow that had surrounded her hands then now lingered at her fingertips even in the absence of the moon, a quiet hum beneath her skin that reminded her of what she carried. The bloodline of prophecy, a power that could shake kingdoms and challenge crowns. Yet Leora did not rush. She had learned patience from years of exile, from nights spent hiding in quiet places, watching and waiting. She moved carefully, observing the court, noticing the cracks in loyalty, the tension between Kale and Selene, and the murmurs of nobles who did not trust either woman completely. Selene, the newly crowned Luna, had grown more confident in public, her smile radiant in the eyes of the court. But in private, Leora saw her falter. The Luna was clever and ambitious, yes, but her connection to the king was not as strong as it seemed. There were moments when her voice faltered, when her eyes searched the halls as if she feared unseen enemies. Leora noted these carefully, storing them away. She did not wish to harm Selene unnecessarily. Her path was not yet of confrontation, it was of preparation. Kale remained a constant presence in her mind, though she avoided unnecessary contact. The moments in the garden had changed something between them, a subtle recognition, a tension neither could ignore. He moved through the castle with a weight she understood. The crown bore responsibilities that no one could see, duties that even love could not outweigh. And yet, in fleeting glances, in small hesitations, she sensed his curiosity, his awareness of her presence, and even a longing he dared not speak. One evening, as the moon rose high and the castle quieted, Leora found herself in the library. Ancient texts lined the walls, their leather covers worn by centuries of hands. She ran her fingers along the spines, seeking knowledge of her bloodline, of the magic she barely understood. The scrolls spoke of prophecy, of a bloodline tied to the moon, destined to challenge the throne and restore balance to the kingdom. Her pulse quickened with every word. The magic she had felt was not accidental, it was her inheritance. A soft sound made her glance up. Kale stood at the entrance, his dark eyes studying her with a mixture of caution and fascination. "You read these books as if they were alive," he said quietly, stepping closer. "They are alive," she replied, her voice calm, "and they speak the truth. My bloodline, it is tied to this kingdom, to the crown, to the moon. Everything I am has a purpose." He moved closer, his gaze fixed on her hands. "And yet you hide it," he said, a shadow of admiration in his tone. Why conceal something so powerful?" "Because power is dangerous," Leora replied. "In the wrong hands it destroys everything. In mine it could change everything, and I am not ready, not yet." He reached out, almost instinctively, as if to touch her hand, but stopped himself. The distance between them was electric, charged with unspoken words and impossible longing. "I feel it," he said, his voice low. "Even in the smallest moments I feel it, and I fear what comes next for you, for me, for the kingdom." Leora met his gaze, unwavering. "Then we face it together," she said softly. "We must learn to control it, to use it wisely, and perhaps to trust one another." Their eyes held, the tension between them thick, like the charged air before a storm. For the first time, Leora felt that perhaps she did not have to face the coming challenges alone. And yet, she also knew that her path was filled with danger, with hidden enemies, and with choices that could tear her heart apart. The next day, whispers reached her ears. Nobles had noticed strange occurrences, small illusions, lights that flickered where no candles burned, whispers in empty corridors. Leora knew she had to be careful. Every display of her magic drew attention, and the court was already wary of anything beyond the ordinary. If they discovered her true power too soon, they would act against her, or worse, against the king. It was then that the first real threat appeared. Leora overheard a conversation between two courtiers in the hall. "The girl who moves unseen, she is dangerous," one said. "The king trusts her too much. If she learns to control her magic fully, nothing will stop her." Then she must be tested, the other replied. Before she grows beyond control. Leora's heart raced. The court had already begun to notice her presence, and not all attention was kind. Her instincts screamed that danger was near, and her magic thrummed beneath her skin, responding to the threat like a quiet drumbeat of warning. That evening she found Kale alone in the gardens once more. "Someone is watching," she said without preamble, her voice tense. "They know about my power. The court is whispering, and not all whispers are harmless." He frowned, his dark eyes narrowing. "I feared as much," he admitted. "And yet you continue to move within the palace, risking everything." "Because I must," she said. "If I hide, if I retreat, then my destiny will never be fulfilled, and the kingdom will continue to suffer under ignorance and fear." He studied her for a long moment as if weighing her words. Then he said softly, "You are braver than I imagined, and yet I worry for you, Leora. I cannot shield you from everything, not even as king." She shook her head. "You cannot shield anyone, not even yourself," she said. "The crown is heavy, but so is destiny, and both must be carried." For a long while they walked in silence, the moonlight reflecting off the fountains and statues, silvering their path. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the kind that could shatter hearts or build empires. Then suddenly a shout broke the silence. From the edge of the garden a cloaked figure fled, carrying what looked like a small satchel. Leora's eyes narrowed. "They have discovered something," she whispered. Without hesitation, she ran, her magic flaring faintly to guide her steps. The figure stumbled near the outer wall of the garden, and Leora caught up with him. With a flick of her hand, she caused a soft, glowing net of light to wrap around him, holding him in place. The man struggled, but her magic was stronger than his fear. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice cold. "What do they want?" The man's eyes widened in terror. I cannot say," he stammered. "But they know about the girl, about the magic, about the king." Leora felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer whispers or suspicion. This was a direct threat, a plan unfolding that could put the king, the Luna, and herself in danger. Her magic pulsed stronger, responding to the threat and feeding her courage. "Then we stop them," she said firmly. "No one will use my power or the king for their own gain." Kale arrived at her side, his eyes wide at the display of her strength. You saved him," he said quietly, awe in his tone. "And yet you could have destroyed him." "I control it," Leora said. "I will not let it harm the innocent, but I will not hide from danger either." For the first time, Kale truly understood the power she carried, the responsibility she bore, and the bond that destiny had begun to weave between them. As they walked back to the castle, side by side, the moonlight cast long shadows on the path before them. Leora's hand still glowed faintly, a reminder of what had been awakened. She knew the coming days would be filled with more tests, more betrayals, and more choices that would challenge not only her power but her heart. And yet, for the first time, she felt a quiet certainty. She was no longer just a shadow in the halls of the palace. She was the bloodline of prophecy, rising with the moon, and nothing, not the court, not the king, not the danger waiting in the shadows, could deny what she was becoming. The kingdom slept, unaware that its fate was no longer in the hands of those who held crowns and titles. The fate of Lumeria rested with a girl who moved unseen, whose magic pulsed with the moon, and whose heart carried the weight of both love and destiny. The night of the lunar eclipse arrived like a silent promise of change. The moon, usually silver and calm, now hung red and shadowed, casting an eerie glow over the kingdom of Lumeria. The palace was quiet, but beneath its stone walls, currents of magic and tension stirred. Every torch seemed to flicker with urgency, and every shadow whispered of secrets waiting to be revealed. Leora stood in her hidden chamber, her hands glowing faintly with the power that had grown inside her over the past weeks. The bloodline in her veins pulsed like a drumbeat of destiny, echoing through her body. Tonight, she would no longer be a shadow. Tonight, She would face the destiny that had been written in the stars long before she was born. The palace corridors were empty as she moved, each step deliberate and quiet. Her cloak brushed against the cold marble, and the soft hum of her magic accompanied her, a subtle symphony of power. She knew the court had spies, loyal to the crown, curious or greedy, but tonight she would not be hidden. In the gardens, Kale waited. He had sensed her presence, drawn by the same pulse of magic that stirred her own blood. The king's dark eyes reflected the red-tinted moon as he stepped from the shadows, his expression a mixture of worry, awe, and something more, something that had grown quietly over weeks of stolen glances, whispered conversations, and shared moments of tension. "You came," he said softly, his voice carrying through the still night. "I always come," she replied, her hands glowing brighter. "When it matters most." Kale stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face as if to memorize every feature, every expression. "Leora, the court is restless," he said. "There are whispers, factions. They have noticed the magic in the halls. If anyone knew," his voice faltered, and for a moment he seemed vulnerable in a way few had ever seen. "They do not know," Leora said firmly. "And they will not. Not tonight." Her hands pulsed, the faint glow illuminating the delicate curve of her fingers. "Tonight I face what I must, and you will see who I truly am." For a long moment they stood together beneath the shadowed moon, the world around them suspended in silence. Then, without warning, the night erupted into chaos. Torches flared as a group of masked figures stormed the garden, moving with precision and intent. Leora's magic flared instantly, a shield of silver light surrounding her and Kale, pushing the intruders back. "They know," she whispered, her pulse quickening. "They know I am here." Kale drew his sword, moving beside her. "Then we fight," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. "Together." The masked figures advanced, but Leora's magic was stronger than she had ever felt. With a wave of her hands, the air shimmered, creating illusions that confused their attackers, turning them against one another. Light bent and twisted around her, a dance of silver and red beneath the eclipse. Kale's sword flashed in the moonlight, striking with precision, protecting her when the illusions faltered. Amid the chaos, Leora realized the true danger. One of the masked figures was different, familiar, cunning, a shadow from within the court itself. This was no random attack. Someone who knew her secret had orchestrated this assault, someone who understood the power she carried. "You are strong," a voice hissed from the shadows, "but not strong enough." Leora's eyes narrowed. The figure stepped forward into the red glow of the eclipse, revealing the face of a trusted court advisor, a man who had always seemed loyal, whose whispers had guided the king and the Luna alike. Betrayal was a bitter taste in her mouth, but her resolve hardened. "I am stronger than you know," she said, her voice echoing with magic. The red-tinted moon reflected in her glowing hands, amplifying the energy she had restrained for so long. "And I will not let you harm the kingdom or the king." The advisor sneered and advanced, but Leora was ready. Her magic surged outward in a wave of silver light, knocking him back and sending his followers sprawling. The ground trembled beneath the force, and even Kale had to shield his eyes from the brilliance. When the light faded, the intruders lay unconscious, scattered across the garden, their weapons glinting uselessly in the moonlight. Leora's breathing was steady, but her heart raced with the adrenaline of confrontation. She looked at Kale, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and something deeper, love perhaps, or the first glimmer of hope. "You saved the kingdom," he said softly, "and me." "I could not do otherwise," she replied. "This is my destiny, Kale, but destiny is not enough. I need you to trust me." He stepped closer, reaching for her hands. Their fingers brushed, and in that simple touch a connection ignited, a bond forged not only by power but by understanding and unspoken longing. "I trust you," he said quietly, "more than anyone else. More than I have trusted in years." Leora's chest tightened. The tension between duty and desire, prophecy and choice, had brought them to this moment. The moon, now partially eclipsed, cast a shadow over them both, a reminder that light and darkness coexisted, that power and love could not exist without balance. "We must be careful," she said, her voice firm. "The court will recover. They will come again. And the Luna, she will question everything." "I do not care," Kale said, his eyes locked on hers. "I see you, Leora, and nothing will change that." For a moment, words were unnecessary. The bond between them, forged through danger, secrecy, and mutual recognition of strength, spoke louder than any oath. Yet even in this quiet triumph, Leora felt the weight of what was to come. Her bloodline was rising, her power awakening fully, and the kingdom itself seemed to pulse with anticipation of the destiny she was meant to fulfill. The red moon continued to climb, casting a shadow across the garden. Leora felt a surge of energy, stronger than before, and realized that her magic was no longer just a shield. It could shape the world around her, bending reality to her will. But with great power came great responsibility. One wrong move and she could become the very threat she was destined to prevent. Kale watched her, sensing her inner struggle. "Do not fear what you are," he said gently. "I will stand with you, always." Her eyes glistened in the red-tinted moonlight. "Then we rise together," she said. And in that moment, the first true choice of her destiny became clear: to embrace her power, to protect the kingdom, and to accept the love she had long hidden behind shadows. The night was silent after the battle, the echoes of magic fading into the marble corridors and silvered gardens. The palace slept, unaware of the forces that had collided beneath the lunar eclipse. Leora and Kale stood together, hands entwined, watching the red moon slowly return to silver. "You could rule by fear," Kale said quietly, breaking the silence. "But you do not. You could claim the crown for yourself, but you choose another path." "I choose what is right," Leora said. "Not what is easy, not what is demanded. I choose the kingdom and I choose you." He pulled her closer, their foreheads touching. "And I choose you," he whispered. "Not the crown, not duty, not tradition. You." For a long moment the world felt still. The red moon faded, leaving silver light in its place, and in that quiet, Lumeria itself seemed to breathe. The prophecy of the bloodline had begun, not as a threat, but as a promise of balance, of courage, and of love that could shape the destiny of a kingdom. But even as they stood together, a faint shadow flickered in the corners of the palace, a reminder that not all threats were gone. Whispers of betrayal, envy, and ambition still lingered. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, tests, and choices that demanded both heart and wisdom. Yet in this moment, beneath the silvered moon, Leora and Kale allowed themselves to simply exist together, bound by trust, recognition, and the quiet power of love. The bond that had been forged in secrecy, danger, and longing had finally become undeniable. Leora's bloodline had risen, but it was not a weapon of destruction. It was a force of transformation. And as the moonlight bathed the gardens, the palace, and the hearts of those who would shape the kingdom, a new era began, one where power and love, destiny and choice, walked together in the light and shadow of the crown. The kingdom of Lumeria would never be the same. And neither would their hearts.